The residential housing market is likely to collapse because of commercial real estate, Airbnbs, and more. Wrong, 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 wrong. Let me get into reasons why that's completely wrong. I know there's so many guys on YouTube talking about this housing market that's coming very soon. Well, I see it differently, and I'm going to get into all that, so stick around. Good morning. My name is Adam Kahn, and I'm the Rational Investor. Today is Saturday, January 27th. I hope you're all doing well. Before I forget, before I get into the housing market and why it's not collapsing, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. You could also smash that like button. I really appreciate the help. It helps YouTube's algorithm. It helps other people find the channel. So if you're finding the content interesting, I think it's super cool. On top of, I want to thank you all who've subscribed already. We're over 3,000 subscribers, which I can't believe. I really just started this for fun and because I like to talk about markets. And it's really nice seeing people, chime in and join along. So let's talk about the housing market and why I don't see a collapse coming. Because we'll get into the things that the YouTubers and other people who are negative the market point at and all the data points, which I know them too, and they are out there, and things can change at some point. But at least for now, I don't see a reason why we're going to have any big correction. So, one thing that they often point to is the national debt. I grew up in New York, and I remember walking into the city or going into the city with my parents and them pointing to this building that used to have a thing going around and around and around showing the national debt. It was the same fear, the same concerns, because the national debt was going up really quickly. You could see how fast the numbers were moving. I don't really see that as much difference. On top of that, if the debt gets bad and we have more inflation or the dollar weakens, house prices are more likely to go up than down. They may have to counterbalance it by trying to raise interest rates again, but that's really what would happen if the debt got out of control to a point that it starts impacting our dollar. The debt is not really a reason for our housing market to collapse. If anything, it could cause hyperinflation, which would cause things to get more expensive, not less. So I'm not really sure I understand the theory behind, as we build up more national debt, that that's going to help cause a housing collapse. The other one that gets pointed to consistently lately is that we have over $1 trillion in credit card debt. I do see this as a problem for a certain sector of the population as well. Credit card debt is terrible. The interest rates are super high. It hurts people pretty badly. But as long as unemployment isn't going through the roof and people are defaulting on the lower end and not the upper end, they restructure and they figure it out. And it's not the same people running up credit card debt that are out there shopping for homes. You also have to take everything into context. These high interest rates, if you look at like Visa and MasterCard stock, they're pushing all-time highs and doing really well, which tells me that clients or consumers who have the debt are making their minimum monthly payments. The minimum monthly payments are probably stretching their budget and causing their lives to be day to day, which is why they have more people who are living paycheck to paycheck. But that doesn't mean it's a reason for the economy to collapse either. So now we've debunked two of the things that they're pointing to. So one of the other things that they often talk about is the average income versus how much the price of a home and the monthly payment has gone up. And I will agree that it is stretched to higher levels than it was in the past. Same as the cost of a carton of eggs or the cost of milk or going to a football game or a hockey game. We had inflation. Housing gets left in that same bucket of inflation. It hasn't gone up as much as some of the other things, actually, when you really look at it, and partially because the Fed did raise interest rates, which pushed mortgage rates higher, which slowed how much the housing went up, which was their goal. And their goal is still to have inflation. They would just like it down to a 2% inflation rate instead of where it got to, and we're already down in the threes, which is much lower than when it was at 9%. Now, keep in mind that lower inflation is not the same as deflation. So the goal is not a housing market collapse, and I think they're managing their goal. And if we look at the price of income in terms of the price of a home going up, just keep in mind that what ends up happening is the really wealthy who have money to invest, as they get wealthier and wealthier, they have no reason to sell the properties that they already have. So what ends up happening is they collect more and more of them, taking them off the market. And if they were able to get into those homes previously when the prices were cheaper and the interest rates are lower, all the more reason that they're less likely to put them on the market. There's this theory that if interest rates come down, you'll see some of those come to the market. I don't subscribe to that theory. I think people are content where they are if they're living in a primary residence, and those that bought it as an investment property are happy to be in the situation they're in. And then you have a natural ebb and flow of how many people move no matter what the interest rates are or no matter how good they're into a house. There's a certain segment of the population that sometime between 2 and 7 or 8 years, they're just going to get anxious and want to move no matter what. I don't think they're really going to pay too much attention that interest rates are higher. They'll complain about it, but if they've built up equity in the house and they can put more down or anything else to justify the reason why they might move, I think they move and they complain about the higher interest rates, but they decide whether they're moving not based on any of those things. And as the interest rates come down, you're not going to see a huge influx of properties on the market being sold because now they can refinance or get the new one at 5% instead of the 3% they're in. I think the people who are in that position are still more likely to keep the homes that they have at 3% and consider moving, which will take more inventory off the market. Not this theory of, oh, if interest rates come down, then you'll see market houses come to the market. Then there's the discussion of Airbnbs and the laws changing and this huge influx of all these people that are going to fail and will need to sell their homes because they're in so much financial trouble because of the Airbnb collapse. It sounds great, but if you look at the percentage of homes that are actually Airbnb, even if the number is a decent sized number, it's not a huge percentage to impact the real estate market. I get the concept. At the same time, people are finding ways around Airbnb to still do that. It's not right. And I see the news headlines from time to time of somebody getting fined for cheating the system, and I'm sure that probably happens. But again, this is not something that's going to just be a market driver from this huge influx of homes. Keep in mind, we also had a lot of Wall Street start getting involved in residential real estate. They have pretty deep pockets and they're not going to flood the market. They don't make poor decisions of panic. They might slowly let some homes out if they're not profitable, but they also might do an analysis of how much they need to get in rent and have a certain percentage of the homes rented out and not worry whether they have some vacancy or not. They're really good at their analysis and their math is incredible. So they might realize they're better off just leaving some of those houses empty and letting them sit than actually selling them or lowering rents or whatever their analysis tells them. So I really don't think we're going to have this huge influx from them either, unless that law that was on the table gets passed where they're forced to sell. But again, keep in mind, that's only 10% of what their books are per year over the next 10 years. That is not anything, again, that's going to drive a big collapse. Really, what you need for a collapse is panic selling. Let's not just talk about some people selling, but if you don't have massive unemployment that causes everybody at the same time to panic sell, not individual cases, there's really no reason for a market to have a collapse. As the cost of homeowners insurance, gas bills, electric bills, and everything else continue to go higher, sure, that'll squeeze some people out that'll be pushed to sell. But again, you're going to have more people complaining that it's too expensive and just readjusting their lives to deal with it than a mass panic sale. I just don't see where you're going to get everybody to come into the market the same way we did in 2008, 9, and 10. Now, what happened then, so that we can discuss the difference, was the loans that were in place. We don't have the option arm with stated income and stated assets anymore. That was a major contributor to the financial crisis that everybody seems to leave out of the picture. So put yourself in a position where you have a loan option that gives you four different choices of the payment to make. You have interest only, you have what's called negative amortization. Forgive that that's hard for me to say, but where you're actually adding more debt onto the house each month. You then have your traditional loan payment, and then you could also add funds to the account. Most people, and forgive me, didn't really understand it, and when they would get their bill, they would naturally choose the lowest payment. Well, the lowest payment was continuing to add how much balance of debt you owe on your home. Well, if you get four options and one of them is 600, the other one is 1100, the next one is like 2000 and change, and the last one's even more than that, I think a lot of people gravitated towards paying the least they could. This was actually a good product, but it wasn't intended to be sold to my mom, for example. It was intended for investors who would flip a home and then sell it for a profit that they wanted to take advantage of paying the least they could in the time that it took for them to fix up a house and get it sold. It really wasn't intended to be sold across the country as this great product. It was then repackaged into these mortgage-backed securities where they combined tons of them and sold off as AAA paper, even though people just stated their income and stated their assets. So keep in mind, I see a lot of videos talking about how the incomes were better back then, the assets were better, and things like that. But everybody was lying. If they said they made 200,000, but they only made 50,000, and that's the information that you're using for that data, well, you have bad data to compare to the market today. So now let's go back. You have those four options, but after either 3 or 5 years, they do what's called seasoning. And at that point, you have to make what's your adjusted now regular mortgage payment. And if you've been paying the minimum, you've added more debt. So you might have a payment go from $600 or $700, and I'm making up the numbers, but I know they're somewhat accurate because my sister had gotten into one of these loans, and this is basically what happened, despite my brother and I talking her through it. Well, you go from 600 or 800 a month, and the next month you get a bill, and you have to pay 2,800 per month, and you're caught off guard. Add to that real estate started correcting. So now you look at your $400,000 home and notice that it's only worth 350, and you're being forced to pay four times the amount you were previously. I think that's a much different situation than where we are now, where people who bought the homes 2 years or more have got 2 years ago or more have a good amount of equity, have a super low interest rate, and is not seasoning into a new payment that's double, triple, quadruple what it was previously. They're pinned into this good situation. They're not pinned into a bad one. Well, you add that to tons of people across the country who didn't have the income they said, who now have these seasoned payments, and you have a lot of people panic selling their homes at the same time. Tell me in today's market what's going to happen to cause that type of panic selling. It isn't the Airbnbs. And then let's talk about the commercial real estate, because what I've seen going on with the commercial real estate is the banks don't want the properties. So what I've seen with the people I know, and forgive me, this is a tiny little microcosm, this is not the entire market, but I've seen two things happen. On the properties that they take, sometimes the company that had the loan is the one buying it back at a hugely discounted price. Otherwise, they're letting them just go month to month on what the previous payments were when interest rates were lower because they don't want to take over the property. The property doesn't qualify to refinance because the interest rates are higher and the rent rolls are not enough to justify the types of loans that are used to do the commercial property loans. So what happens is they say to the client, well, just keep making your payments and we'll wait it out and see what happens. Because again, the bank doesn't want the property. They don't want to get stuck with the loss. And then add to it that the Federal Reserve has guaranteed that they can sell the bonds at par if they need to get out because they're stuck, so that they don't have to take the loss that they would. So you have all of these security systems in place protecting this big commercial collapse that everybody sees coming. My best guess is they'll wait it out until the rates are lower and when they can qualify for new loans, and they'll decide what they want to do from there. Because most of these loans are what are called non recourse loans. That's why the bank doesn't want to take them over. Non recourse means they can't go after the person who took on the loan to pay off the full balance. So they only get what's there. So same like the residential market, those commercial properties went up in value, and the people who invested refinanced at higher prices, pulling their money out. So it's all just paper money that are the profits. Well, if you're the bank and somebody put down X, was able to refinance and take X plus additional money out in cash, and now they're in a position that that property can't qualify for the new interest rates, well, maybe you just let them make their old payments in hopes that things work themselves out, especially when you have the backstop of the Federal Reserve that if it doesn't, you get to go to them and get help on the loss. Now, by all means, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me what you see. Tell me why you see a big residential collapse coming. The thing is, when I look at the comments and I see what people are saying, I think the reality is people hope that housing prices come down. Hope is not a great way to make your bets. I mean, my brother jokes about that with me if I buy a stock and I hope it goes higher. He's like, I wouldn't count on hope. I would say the same thing with the housing market. I think just like going to the supermarket, it's really better to be perfectly honest with ourselves that the economy has changed and the new prices of things, whether that's a home or a carton of eggs, are something to get used to. And move forward accordingly. I'm not saying just jump in and buy, but if renting makes more sense, go out and rent. But if you want to buy a house, I wouldn't sit on the sidelines waiting for a collapse that may never come. Maybe it does, but year in and year out, if I were to make my bet every year, I say it doesn't come. One year it will, I totally get that, but most of the time it doesn't. Now, you have to make your own financial decisions. This is not financial advice. I am just some guy on YouTube sharing my information, and maybe I am a complete moron. So, really, you don't need to listen to me. You need to decide for yourselves. I'm just sharing my information of what I've seen over the years. And this time does not feel like 2007 and 2008. Now, I'll be happy to document that back in 2006, I panic sold my place in Chicago because I saw the market going crazy and I had concerns that there would be a big correction. I don't know what I think it's different this time. My body doesn't feel the same way. I don't see the big collapse coming, but maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, again, do me a favor. I know I've talked a long time. Hit that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, make some comments. Tell me what you guys think. Have a great day.